Hi there, I'm Rich Sides with Adroit Hardware Solutions. I'm here with Dave Ivy, who's our director and in charge of sales and service for the company. So today we're going to talk about the concepts of receiving and putting together what we'll call receiving bundles. Um, Certainly, a number of receiving uh, scenarios that are out there are extreme, anywhere from straightforward pallets with cases on it that just going to go straight into a pallet rack to complex scenarios where perhaps we've got trucks coming across truck scales and weighing in and out and feeding silos or tankers, or so the number of scenarios is kind of is large. So perhaps what we can do today is we'll just pick a few different receiving scenarios, and we'll just talk through like what are the considerations that folks should look at in terms of how to get the right set of devices and processes to enable productivity improvements while reducing congestion and improving accuracy. I think are kind of some universal goals, we'll say, to the receiving process. Yeah, so Dave, let's look at let's say a standard LTL truck comes in and it's got, say, 10 pallets of product that need to be received in. It's at room temperature and it's, got, we'll say, 20 cases per pallet. But we just basically just want to count them, slap a label, receive them, and put them away. We'll say that the put away would be a forklift coming over, picking it up, and putting it into a slot. So maybe just kind of just take us through a little bit. Um, how, first of all, right? So, like in your mind, how would a mobility solution work? What kind of devices? Just sort of just talk through the scenario from like when the truck arrives. Like what would sort of be a best in class sort of a process there?
Yeah, sure, sure. So, first of all, I mean, certainly we're going to advocate that you're going to be receiving on the dock, right? So you'll need a wireless infrastructure, you'll need a mobile device, but we want the worker to be interacting with the receipt and with what they need to be doing. And then doing it in real time instead of relying on paper or clipboards or pre-printed labels that they're sorting through and then trying to match with what they found. In order to be as accurate as we can be and process things efficiently, we think it makes a huge difference to have that have that activity happening on the floor at the dock door. Um, I think on the device side, a couple of things. Obviously, it's application specific. So we need to know, and what's the application that's going to be running? What are the requirements for that?
Meaning like the software
Um,
application, right? So
yeah,
Business
software
Central
application.
or right, NetSuite or
Right,
like whatever. So we want to make sure
right.
that the stuff runs. What,
Yep.
like, are there different operating systems, or like how does that vary?
Yeah, you still have everything is kind of moved over from Windows to Android on the mobile equipment side.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
then there's also the Apple iOS. So, depending on the application that you're running, um, although if you had if you're just using a browser screen,
Mm-hmm.
then obviously a Windows tablet would also work just fine. So I think there's a lot of variation in possibilities, particularly on the receiving side. So it could be a touchscreen handheld. It could be a handheld that has a hard keypad. It could be a tablet. It could be a multifunction device that
Mm-hmm.
is maybe one of those hybrid laptops. So I think all those have some potential depending on the work environment and the type of product that you're going to be receiving.
So is it typical? It's with like so if it's an Android, so it would just be installed as like an app, like an Android app, like just like what you
Yeah,
do on a cell phone, something like that. That seems to
yeah,
be probably,
that's
I would imagine that's probably more so the common approach these days is to have,
that is absolutely, I would say, the most
yeah,
prevalent of the options for sure.
and maybe what some of those reasons, like real estate, and when we talk about like screen size, like because mobile devices tend to have smaller screens, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one of the yeah, and that's one of the challenges and
Mm-hmm.
one of the big decisions point, right? Of what's that application screen look like? How much interaction does that receiver need to do with the screen? So if there's a lot of activity that they need to record at receive time, that may lean you more toward let's say an 8-inch tablet.
Hmm.
So I get a little more real estate size, but I'm trying to balance that with something that they're going to be able to work with and use while they're active on the floor. Um, but
Hmm.
you can also see, some of the touchscreen devices, will have a full 6-inch screen, so pretty good size screen that they can interact with, and then right from an application standpoint, right, it'll just take them through multiple screens and take them through the steps they need to complete.
So, so, well, like what? Let's just talk a little bit like what is a mobile device? Like how to
Mm-hmm.
like um, because there's a variety of things here, right? So there's like looking at information. How do you put information in? And then there's or triggering activities like a print or something like that, right? And
Yep.
then there's also say the pallets are coming in with an identification code on them, a 2D barcode or a 1D barcode, right? How do you like so just like what are the range of features on these mobile computers?
Yeah, so on the mobile device, particularly for receivers, so yeah, obviously screen real estate, which we've talked about. Kind of the question of do you need a hard keypad or is the soft keypad going to be effective? And particularly hard keypad comes into play. If they're going to do a lot of data entry, if they're working with gloves, if they're working in a cold environment, there's some of those factors come into
Mm-hmm.
play where keypads make sense. Um, Anything where there's going to be the ability to capture data via barcode at receive time, we are going to highly recommend that you have a rugged device with a integrated scanner built in. You can add on scanners to devices, but it's just not the same as if you have an integrated scanner right into the equipment.
So have you seen sort of like a go-to device for receiving? And
Yeah,
and
I mean,
and then sort of in like in this room temperature, we'll say
I think
50 to
in
100 degree temperature range kind of a thing.
right, right. So I mean, definitely like the Zebra TC5 devices or something that come to mind. It's one of those.
Hmm.
It's a middle of the road rugged device. It's got a 6-inch screen. Certainly, depending on the application, there's some other Zebra devices, the MC 93 or 94, or the MC33 series, where I've got a little bit smaller screen, but I
Hmm.
pick up that hard keypad. Um, and then I think the tablets either from Honeywell or from Zebra. Again, particularly around receiving, if it's not going to be too scan intensive, I think the tablets can be a good fit. If it is something where there's going to be a lot of scanning at receive time, well, then having a more of a handheld device is going to be a benefit.
Do they come with cameras?
They absolutely can come with cameras. Yeah, I think again, that'll be
Hmm.
depending on the configuration and the
Hmm.
workflow and the capabilities. So, if capturing an image is part of receiving versus part of quality,
Hmm.
then absolutely you can look at the devices that'll have a front or rear facing camera on them.
Okay. Right. So like oh, the majority of the ERP solutions that anybody would be looking at for say like food or any kind of regulated environment are going to have an integrated quality module to it. Like, what do you typically see in terms of like being able to record, all the quality checks that are part of, say, like a
Right.
HACCP plan or something like that? Is that typically more of a tablet, or you do as a mobile? Like, what do you see in terms of the standards there?
Yeah, I think either tablet or a touch device, right? So it tends to be
Hmm.
that with those kind of applications, it's walking you through a series of checks and questions and those kind of things, capturing images. So typically a touch device, and again, it's how much screen real estate do you need, right? Is the 6-inch screen going to be good enough? Is an 8-inch screen better? Or do you have a highly complex receiving process and maybe a 10-inch tablet that's more 10-inch tablet gets a little bit bulky to
Yeah. Hmm.
carry, but potentially you're at a workstation, and the product's in front of you, and then you can touch your way through the tablet application that way.
Okay, so in our sort of basic scenario, say we've
Hmm.
got, I don't know, 10 dock doors, right? So you got maybe 400 or 500 feet, something like that, in terms of the spread across from one end, from dock door 1 to dock door 10. Um, how would you, and so you got, say, like four folks that are receiving, counting, and labeling the pallets.
Right.
How would you organize that? Again, every situation varies, but how would you organize that? How would you, and hypothetically, how would you equip them, saying that this is, 50 to 80 degree temperature swing, so nothing dry,
Hmm.
like how would you equip those folks, to, and say it's food coming in, right? So we need to count it, inspect it, and label it. It's like, how would you label all that, or outfit all that?
Okay. So yeah, so I mean, again, we'd recommend mobile devices for the person doing the receiving, um, and then whether it's that person or if they've got a helper with them, so you'd go through and complete your receiving on a given set of items or a given pallet. Um, Typically within the application, then you'll have the ability to hit the print button, which will print out your labels, whether that's going to be case labels or pallet labels, whichever that whatever the use case calls for. Um, and then in the space you're describing, you got a couple of options, right? Some companies will have those label printers kind of restricted. Maybe they're over by the supervisor desk, maybe they're away from the doors, so they're away from the traffic, and so the workers got to travel a little bit to pick up those labels. um, the broader you get from a number of doors and size standpoint, then you start seeing the benefits of bringing in multiple printers, maybe separating that receiving area into zones so that maybe doors 5 through 10, they print over to printer number 2, and 1 through 4, they can use a shared printer that's over by the say the supervisor desk or just over out of the way. So definitely you want
Hmm.
to factor in that walk time and trying to keep
Interesting.
it as
Okay.
efficient as you can.
Yeah, so I've seen mobile printers, like on, like,
Hmm.
somebody's hip or something like that. Um, do you see those tending to work in a high volume receiving area, or like what are some trade offs for those?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen those as well. So you can have individual printers with a specific person. I've also seen companies that will outfit a cart with a battery and have a kind of more of a tabletop printer that they'll roll out to their work area. So that, and then you've got a one-on-one situation, right? So I've got one device, I've got one printer. So if I print to it, I know I'm going to get my label. It avoids any
Hmm.
confusion or any mix up where I got the wrong labels going to the wrong pallet. Um, the biggest thing around the mobile label printers is the size, right? So I have this big advantage; it can go with me. I can wear it, but then my roll size is tremendously smaller than if I had an industrial printer, with a 8-inch roll of labels on it. So the big thing to balance there is the benefit of having it close by with the reality that it's only going to hold so many labels depending on your label size. And if it's a heavy label intensive environment, I'm going to end up changing the roll a whole bunch of times, and that
Yeah,
just
so it's
takes
a
time,
volume issue,
right?
right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so it's contrasted with, sort of like one of the standards is the big zebras with, big rolls in them, and they've got kind of a sort of a stick label or something like that. So,
Hmm.
like, what are sort of our options in terms of small, medium, and large, and like surround, like, mass printing? Like, what sort of some of the options we got there?
Yeah, so I think on the higher volume so Zebra and others, they're going to have performance tiers as well as value tiers. So the higher the demand is, and the higher volume of labels that you're going to print, or the higher quality labels that you need to print, then you kind of move up into some of the high performance side. If it's really just it's an internal receiving label. It's going to be in your building for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And it really is just, something you're going to use to tag and use for inventory. Then obviously, you can use a lower quality. You're not going to have, likely not going to have, images or logos or any of that kind of stuff on the labels.
Yeah, so the media matters, right? So like if you've got product that, for example, is going to go into a high humidity situation, that I would imagine there's different media to use, meaning like label types, versus if it's going into a freezer, and adhesives don't work as well in freezers and stuff like
Right.
that. So maybe just like,
Right.
what are some of our trade-offs on the print media? Like there's so many variables in this whole receiving thing.
Yeah,
It's
right,
kind of
right,
like
right.
getting
And
into.
I am not the best on the media side of things, but you're absolutely right. So it's gonna,
Hmm.
well, there's also a couple of different kinds of, there's direct thermal versus thermal transfer printers,
Hmm.
and the direct
What's
thermal is the most economic, but that's kind of the receipt label.
how's that? Oh,
Um,
so when you say direct, or like, what was it? Direct thermal versus what?
Yeah, direct thermal versus thermal transfer. So direct thermal is kind of more like that receipt label that you're going to get from a mobile printer at the airport. So it's
Do these things have?
effective.
Do they have toner, or like I've seen like these ribbon things, like these black ribbon things versus like toner? Is that kind of like what you mean?
This is no black ribbon, and it actually heats up the label. Is kind of the way it works. So there's no
Oh,
toner, there's no
interesting.
ribbon. Um, but it also means that label,
That's kind of
it's
cool.
not going to be as sharp, and it's not going to last as long,
Uh huh.
as far as being a clear image.
Okay, cool. So it's like we're printing with heat.
Absolutely right, and
Yeah.
it's going to be, it'll be effective for a limited amount of time. Right, it's going to
Hmm.
last weeks or months, not years. So if you were printing something that's got a long shelf life that's going to be in the building, or you need a sharp image on a 1D or a 2D barcode, you're absolutely going to be want to be looking at thermal transfer and making sure you can get that best image that you can on there, and a label that's going to last.
Yeah, I think we could probably sit and talk about all different printer types for an hour
Yeah,
alone.
let's yeah
But but
let's
but
go
you know,
let's go back to the world of receiving.
yeah. So so these folks who run around with these mobile computers, they talk over Wi-Fi. Is that kind of like the standard these days on the dock? Is just
Absolutely.
straight up
Yep.
whatever G or H or L or N type of Wi-Fi, whatever the
Yep.
standards are now, right? And um, they run on batteries. Like obviously they run on batteries, right? So how long do these batteries last, and what do we need to think about in terms of power?
So yeah, great question. So and again, there's going to be different classes of devices, and so typically then you'll have, um, different battery capacities that'll go along with them. So depending on your environment, right? So if you're in a just ambient temperature, and an 8-hour workday, standard battery is going to work just fine, right? And then depending on the level of device, even the
They'll
standard
work for
battery.
yeah. So
What's that?
they'll work for 8 hours.
They'll work a full shift for sure, right?
Okay.
Um, but then let's say you have a very scan intensive, environment, and so you're really going to be exercising that device and doing a lot of activity with it. Typically you can then move up into an extended capacity battery, for high volume or high scan intensive environments, or activities. And then I was jumping ahead there a little bit. The environment matters, right? So, cold is something that affects battery performance, and freezer in particular, battery performance. So when you start getting into cold or frozen environments, then that extra battery capacity so that you can get a full shift, out of a battery really, really comes into play.
So so like I'm just going to equate like a power drill, like where you've got like the different batteries that you can, so you charge the
Hmm.
battery and
Exactly.
you swap it in and out. So that's like sort of like one setup versus like my cell phone that I have to plug in, right? So if I have to plug in the device, then I can't use it while it's charging, right? I mean, like,
Yep.
is it kind of like, are there different options there for these mobile computers with that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So again, depending on where you're at, kind of on the value tier versus the performance tier, some of these will come with a swappable battery. Some of them will be hot swappable. Some will be warm swappable, where you can pop that battery out and you can continue working, and pop the new battery in and keep going.
So it's got
Um,
like
eh,
capacitors in it or something, so you get like 30 seconds or a
exactly.
minute or something. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Exactly right. Gives you a little
Yeah,
bit of time.
yeah.
Um, but then, like, so let's say on the tablet side, some of the tablets are just gonna, they'll have a battery installed, and that device is going to have to go back into a charger or get plugged in at some point to recharge. So some of the
Hmm.
devices are not going to be hot swappable. Certainly, it adds a little bit of cost to the device to have these hot swappable batteries. It adds a little to the infrastructure planning, because now I've got spare battery chargers as well as potentially the device chargers. But all those are available in order. And the other big thing around the batteries is if you have multi-shift operations, right? So if I'm going to use that same device across multiple shifts with different workers, then having a swappable battery, so I can always have some ready batteries charged, becomes critical.
Okay. So um, we've had these 5 to 10 dock doors, so we've strategically positioned 2, 3 printers, right? So
Yep.
folks aren't walking all the way over and back. We've outfitted them with mobile computers that will last a full shift, but we've set them up so that they can swap the batteries if they want during the shift, so we can have batteries on standby, and they can, so like just improve our uptime overall. And we can associate, typically for an application, we can associate individual mobile computers to specific printers, so we can kind of assign receivers to particular sets of dock doors and maintain productivity that way. So, and then we've got uh, quality basically walking with tablets where they're doing inspections, and if there's quality issues or something, they can snap a picture on a tablet and record it to their device, etc. So just sort of recap everything you've sort of told me
Hmm.
here
Hmm.
so far. Seems like generally the stationary printers are probably more the way to go, just because of the label capacity, right? So if you're in a high volume receiving situation, you probably want fixed printers, and then it's just really the media. It sounds like really drives a lot of like what the printer requirement is, the volume and the media type that's most applicable, right? So you have to have some understanding there. Not all labels are the same.
Yep. Yep. And
Okay.
and the
Yeah.
specifications on the printer as well, because the printers will come
Hmm.
in, um, again, different. It's dots per inch, basically. Different performance levels on the printer side. As far as the print quality that you're going to get
Okay.
on that label.
So we've printed out the label. Say it's a 2D, right? So we got some options there in terms of the barcode standards that we can
Hmm.
use as well, which can impact the type of scanner that you use. Like today, do like most of these scanners, mobile computers that have scanning capability, et cetera, right? Uh, what are you seeing out in an industry? Are folks typically now moving to 2D barcodes, and like what's the difference between a 1D and a 2D? Let's talk about those barcode scanners a little bit.
Yeah, sure, sure. So the 1D barcode is kind of your typical, bars and numbers at the bottom, right? So if you look at a UPC code, right? If you're going to
Hmm.
scan a UPC code,
That would be the barcode that's
to list on
on
a something at the
individual
grocery
consumer
store,
product.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and 1D barcodes are still predominant, in labeling. And I would say even within the warehouse is probably more 1D than 2D barcodes in the warehouse for what you're going to be scanning. Um, the actual scanners themselves, the mobile computers, uh, has really moved into more the 2D imager, which can also read a 1D barcode, right? So, and the 2D imager, to think of that as more like a QR code that you would see on a screen or on again on a consumer device or a consumer
Yeah.
item,
Hmm.
so that you could either scan that and get taken to a web page for information, right? Is the typical
Right.
consumer use case. Um, the big thing about the 2D barcodes is I can get a lot more information into a smaller space, as
Hmm.
long as everything that's going to read that is capable of reading a 2D barcode. So the majority of the new devices that are out there are going to be capable of reading a 2D barcode.
So, does the barcode? I'm sure, right? The barcode size matters, um,
100%.
and um, like, what's typical range for like a individual mobile, individual handheld mobile computer? Like, what's a typical
Yeah.
scan range
So
and label size, stuff like that?
yeah, so scan range is so it's going to depend, and again, this is kind of the range of opportunity that's out there matched with the use case. So if it's a workflow, let's say it's receiving, and you're going to be physically touching that case that you're going to be scanning, well, then having a standard range imager that's got a range of say out to 24 inches is going to work just fine, right? You're going to
Hmm.
have to you're handling that case anyways, so having to be right up there and scan it is going to be fine. Um, Different devices will have more of an intermediate range, something that'll scan out to say 7, 10, or maybe even 15 feet. So something that I could scan a barcode up close, but maybe I'm that receiver, and then when I'm done, I'm going to flip over, and maybe I am the put away guy, and I'm going to scan something that I'm pulling up to with a pallet jack or a forklift, and I need to be a couple of feet away when I do that. That's kind of that next range, and then there's extended or long range imagers, and these will go out 50, 70, 100 feet. Now, to get that kind of performance, then you've got to have the right style and size of barcode. If you're going to scan something 100 feet away, that is a pretty specific barcode, potentially on a reflective, surface, angled correctly. But if that's a use case that you need to fit, the capabilities there.
Cool. Okay, so um, say we've got a scenario where we've got, say, racking with four levels, like four-level
Mm-hmm.
rack, where we're going to be putting pallets into it. So obviously we can't use a floor jack with a personal device to put a
Mm-hmm.
pallet away on. So how do we deal with forklifts? And just kind of just like talk through that whole pickup from receiving to the put away, and like with a forklift, like what
Yeah.
are considerations there? How would that work?
Okay. So yeah, so the receiver's going to complete what they're doing. They're going to get a pallet tag on something. Typically, that's your indication to the forklift driver. If it's got a internal pallet label on it, that means it's done. And so then they can come up and scan that from within the cab of the lift, scoop up that pallet, and away they go. Now, kind of two scenarios for the forklift devices. Um, they can use a standard handheld. So if they've got a device with a screen and a keypad and one of those extended range scanners, they can have a pistol grip is typically what you'd recommend for if you're going to be aiming at something farther away. And they can use that to capture the barcode and move on. We also, and it's also available, either a dedicated vehicle unit that can get mounted in the forklift, typically then gets plugged into the forklift power. So I don't have batteries to charge. Kind of that management of that whole
Hmm.
device gets a little bit simpler because the holders and the shock absorbers and those kind of components all connect and are installed directly on the forklift. And again, if you're leasing your forklift and those kind of things, there are definitely components you can get where you're not drilling into the metal and those kind of things. If you own them and it's your guys that are installing them, then obviously there's
that's pretty rare.
Is how you install that.
Yeah.
But then on those vehicle units, it could be kind of an all-in-one device that's got a screen and a keypad to it. They've got some newer devices and newer setups where you can drop a ruggedized tablet into a holder that's built for the forklifts, and add a hard and industrial keypad if needed, and then pair that with a long range imager and provide all those tools right in the cab of the lift of the truck.
So are the imagers cabled, or is that Bluetooth, or like how do they connect with the
Yes, those are your two. Those are your two options.
Okay.
So a tethered one has the advantage of it's going to stay with the truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the next part of that is, okay, how do I make sure it doesn't hit the ground? So you can add some tool balancers or some holders or other components where you can kind of help manage to keep that imager in the truck where it's going to be safe and not have it drop out and get run over and those kind of things. There you do have the opportunity to just Bluetooth pair a long range scanner to the vehicle unit. The advantage of that, again, if your use case is there, they could pull up to a location. They'd be able to step out or step, again, within Bluetooth range of their vehicle unit and scan a label. So if you've got a use case for that, then that Bluetooth option becomes valuable.
Oh, that's cool. So we can have on another call. We'll get into a lot more around some of the environmental things. I'm just kind of curious though, for these pallet trucks. Say they're moving in and out of a freezer,
mm-hmm.
right? So you got like this whole fogging effect, right? Mm-hmm. So we've all had glasses like where we go into a freezer and boom, like. Or coming out of the freezer more than going in, but we come out of the freezer and like we fog up. So are these things heated, or like how, like what are kind of some of our options there to keep this thing from fogging up?
Yeah, so you have the different of these vendors will have freezer rated units, and typically what that means is you're going to have a heated screen. You're going to have a heated keyboard, and to do exactly what you're talking about. You're trying to avoid or manage the condensation as best you can. You definitely want the heating the screen so that it does not freeze as you go in and out. Heat the keyboard for the same reason so it doesn't freeze when you go in and out. And then if you're using one of the more pistol grip handheld type devices, they will also heat the scan window. So again, that to help fight the condensation or the condensation freezing on the scan window.
So just sort of building on the environmental a little bit. So like you talk about like a keypad, touchscreen, and those types of things. Mm-hmm. We get into situations where people need to wear gloves, right? Because it's really cold. What's sort of the standard? How do you deal with gloved employees in mobile computing, and how does that all work? Because I can't touch the individual keys or even hit stuff on the touchscreen. So like, how do I deal with this?
Yeah, so that's where it really comes in the application, right, and as well as the device, right? So particularly when you talk about employees that are wearing gloves or heavy gloves, I need a lot of real estate in order to be able to make sure that they're able to hit the right key, right? So if it's a touch screen, I can make it, I think it's capacitive is the right term, so it's a press on the, it's a press and it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be, it's not reacting to the finger. It's just reacting to the pressure. But even that, right, is going to have to be big enough that you can hit the right spot with, with a glove. And so then if you have a hard keypad or a keyboard, obviously keyboard gives you a lot of advantages, right? I've got an individual key for everything, and it's a physical press. But on a keypad, you just want to make sure that those keys are as big as they can be for the input that's needed, and then space them as much as you can. Granted, you're working in limited real estate, right? So there's trade-offs everywhere. But these manufacturers, say for a given device, will have 3, 4, 5, 6 different keypads available. And so if your use case requires certain things, then you can kind of look through the available keypads and see which one is going to work best for your employees and your application.
Lots of things to consider here.
Lots of options. Yes.
Yeah, lots of things to consider. Okay, so let's move on to we'll call it a bulk tote kind of a situation. So this is say like I'm a pancake manufacturer, something like that, and I'm buying totes of flour and I have like specialty flours and stuff like that. And so like these things are coming in 2,000-pound pallet sized totes with in cardboard with say like a plastic liner or something like that, or maybe not, maybe just a tote. So in the food industry, for example, each of those totes may have variability on weight. So say, for example, if it's meat or something like that, it could vary a lot in terms of the product that's coming in. So we get into a situation where we need to weigh stuff. What are some of our options, right? So we would take all the things that we've just talked about in terms of the receiving process, but now we've added in the complexity of needing individualized weighing of pallets coming in. So like, what are some typical setups you've seen there, and what are folks' options when it comes to scales?
Sure. So at the simplest level, and some of this depends on volume and frequency, right? You weigh that tote, however you weigh it, right? Whether you got a floor scale or if you got a hang scale, or however you do that. And then inside the application, you've got a prompt, and you can just key in and record that weight that you can see physically on the scale, right? So at the simplest level, I just need a scale, and I need an entry screen, and I punch in that weight, right? In things like catch weights, right? So maybe some smaller items, or even in the case of the totes, that scale could print out a label for you that'll have a barcode with the weight embedded in it, and then I can take that scanner or imager, scan that weight in, and capture it in and again try to avoid the risk of any problems with mistakes on the keypad entry.
Interesting. So we have a couple options there then. So we could have a scale that's talking to the mobile computer via integration, right? So scales have Wi-Fi. Some scales.
Yeah, Wi-Fi or they're just wired to your network, right? So they would have an IP address, whether they're wireless or wired, either way, right?
So we could run an Ethernet cable, or we could run it via Wi-Fi to the scale, and depending on the software and the application, be able to record those weights real time into the screen. But then our other option is that we could have a printer attached to the scale to print out the tag based on what's been, and then use our mobile computer or device to record the specifics of that pallet to the receipt.
Right. Capture that weight. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, cool.
And again, both of those ways have the advantage that I didn't rely on the worker to read the screen and then hit the right set of keys and not miss a decimal point, or punch in an extra zero, and now I got 10,000 pounds and I really wanted 1,000. or I've got, I needed 100.5 and I got 1,005. Just from just the challenges of that data entry. So either of those two solutions it gives us a better chance of getting that weight captured accurately.
I saw some information the other day where I was looking, and you can actually put load cells and scales on the forklifts in certain situations, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's,
yeah.
if again on your use case, right?
Hmm.
So if it's coming in the door and that's the, one of your options is you already have picked up that tote and you're moving it via a forklift, and then yeah, you can have a scale solution that's connected direct to the fork.
Cool. So, why is it not a good idea for somebody to go out onto, say, like Amazon or something, and pick out some devices for themselves? Like, what are some of the pitfalls they have there in terms of this sort of like the long term investment? Because that's something we run
Yeah,
into a lot.
yeah, certainly for all the reasons that we've been talking, right? To make sure you're getting a device that's going to be appropriate for the environment, that it's got the right, it's the right form factor for the user, it's got the right screen size, it's able to handle whatever that ruggedness level of demand is, right? So if it's dropped to concretes, if it's cold, if it's sunlight, whatever those parameters are, to try to help make sure you've selected the best device for the user for that environment. The other thing that we certainly recommend is, these devices are going to be in a busy environment, and often a pretty rough and tumble environment, depending on how much activity is happening, how quickly. Um, if you can get a device direct from the manufacturer, you can then pair that with some manufactured support for device repair. And so we're a big proponent of not only acquiring the right device, but also making sure that you've got the support and repair coverage that you're going to need over the course of the lifespan of that device.
So, is there a warranty or their service plan? Like, especially like if this is critical receiving, um,
Right.
and maybe just sort of like, what's that situation?
Yeah, so I mean, there's warranty is typically covering things like factory defect, right? So if they
Hmm.
if they determine, hey, we shipped these out and the keypads are bad, we're going to replace them, no charge, that kind of thing. That kind of fits into the world of warranty. The service contract or a support contract is where you're going to get access to their tech support team, and importantly, access to their repair center. It is, I've had customers that are tremendous that send in a handful of devices a year. Their workers take care of them. It's a good paced environment. And there's other customers where it's just a high volume, high paced environment, cold, concrete, and those things. A drop in cold temperatures to concrete is one of the tougher things for a mobile device to survive. Um, and in the case that it dislodges a connection or knocks something off, you can put it in a shipment, send it off to the repair center. They will return your device ready to go, and get that equipment back into service.
Yeah, the situations I would imagine it's probably important to have some spares.
100% for
Yeah,
exactly that reason. Yes, 100%.
yeah.
Yep.
So these service contracts, like, those service contracts, is that kind of like it, or like how does that contractually? How does that work in terms of the service level that you're talking about?
Yeah, so and again, depending on the manufacturer, there's a variety of options available, right? So from shipping, from repair, for the length of term, do you want it for 1 year, for 3 years? Are you going to bundle 5 years of coverage in right out of the gates? So there's a lot of different options. Much as there's options when you're configuring the devices, you have a whole lot of options on what you'd like to see covered. Some of them will cover battery replacement. So on a scheduled timeline, based on standard use cases, they know these batteries are going to degrade over time, and so on a set schedule, they will start replacing your the batteries that you need for the devices in order to keep them in optimal performance.
Interesting. So the batteries are almost a consumable themselves.
Yeah, they're gonna, just like your phone, right? It's gonna hold so many charges before it doesn't want to work a full day, right, or a full shift.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's enough for now, and we've covered sort of the whole receiving, and there's certainly some specific scenarios I think we can jump into on some future calls. But I think that's a good place to stop. A lot of great information there from you today, Dave. And
yeah, no, it's great discussion. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So thanks, and we'll connect again soon.
All right, great.
Okay, bye.